Okay, we're back with our last part of lesson 6. So we got our delete working. We added delete links with a little JavaScript confirmation. And we created a delete method in our controller that accepts in a document ID as an optional parameter. And it uses Mongoose to delete that document from MongoDB and redirect. So we also want to allow users to edit a project. For example, to change the status from to do to in progress, or from in progress to completed, perhaps. In terms of our form, we're going to make an edit page as a separate view. Let's just copy our add form. So just copy all the HTML in project/add, and we'll make a new view. Just make a new file under views and projects called edit.hps. Let's call it edit.hps. We'll just paste in what we have for now. Excuse me. We'll need to add a bit of code here to display the current name, current date, as well as pick the correct course. But for now, we just want it to show. So now under projects, I've got add, index, and I have a new view called edit. We're going to go back to our project's index once we've copied and pasted the add form. We want to make the project name a link. So on index, we'll go to my first column where we're displaying the project name. And in here, I'm going to add as a link to projects/edit. And just like on our delete link, we're going to append the ID. And I'll move my closing anchor tag down here. So this saves us from having to add a button that takes up space on the screen. We can just make the project names clickable. So clicking any project will go to project/edit, and it will pass in the ID of the selected project document. You can go and try this out. So if I refresh my index, if I click on a project, this is to be expected. It's calling the edit method of our projects controller. Well, we don't have that yet. And like with our delete, it's passing in the ID. So this 404 error, this is okay. We would expect this. So first we need a get handler to make our 404 error go away, and we want our edit page to load. So our next step is going to be go back to the projects controller and build a get handler method at the path/edit/ID. So go back to our projects controller, and we're going to write a get handler at projects/edit. And I'll just put in some sample ID here, ABC123. Again, we're handling get. This time our URL is /edit. And just like in our delete on line 61, we've got a document ID parameter. So we basically want to do two things in here. First, we need to use the ID parameter to go and fetch this project. We're going to run a query. And if we find a matching document, we then want to load our edit view and pass it the project document. So we'll call project. And if we want to do a lookup, when we call find, before we called find, this got all the projects. There's no parameters here. This gets all projects. Mongoose also has a method we can use to look up a single document called find by ID. So we're going to use this one instead. So for our D, we get it from our parameters. We pass in our request.params._ID. So in other words, just grab the ID from the URL. And this will give us back an error or a project document. We can do our usual error handling. If there is an error, we'll log it. And if there's no error, we want to render the new edit view we just made, projects edit. We want to give it a title, and we want to pass back the document that we just fetched out of MongoDB. So we can pre-populate the edit form. So otherwise, we'll call res.render, and we'll load the new view we just made, project/edit. And we want to pass a title. Which I'll set as just project details. We could give it any string. And we want to pass in the project. Now there's one other thing we actually have to pass here. Anybody think what it is? We can try this right now. Good guess, Maggie. The ID, we are passing the ID. We can try this out as it is, but we're going to need to make one addition. Let's see why. So I'll go back to projects, click a project. So it's loading. What's missing? Obviously, we have to add the code to populate, but what else is missing from this page? That when we go to add a project, we've got, but if we edit, we don't have. Well, we can use this button. So here's add. Okay, yeah, we'll need the status. So we will need to add that. What else? So here's when we're adding a project. Here's when we're editing. So we need the status. We need one more thing. What about our write? In add, our get add method, which we modified earlier, we are also fetching the list of courses and passing that to the view so that we can display the courses here in the drop-down list. We have to also do that here. Otherwise, our course drop-down is empty. So here we've got to chain a few things together. So before we call res.render, we also now have to get courses for dropdown. So we're running two queries inside of this method. We're getting the project documents, but we also need to get the course documents. So we have to run two queries. I'll put all this in the chat. So first we're going to go and get the project. And if we find it, then we're going to get the list of courses. And we need to pass both the selected project and all the courses. So we're running two separate queries now in this method. This should populate our drop-down list. So now when I refresh, shows the courses. Now we do need the status here as well, as Barak and Maggie pointed out. We didn't need it when we're adding because a new project's always going to be to do. But we need another drop down. We're just going to hard code the options in it though, because those options are never going to change. So I'll go back to my edit form. I'm going to add one more field set. So we'll have a select, name equals status, and for now, I'll just hard code the options. So to do, doing, and done. So we've got two drop downs here now. Our course, which we could probably also sort. We added a sorting here. So I could do that as well. So I'll go back to my controller. And here, after we call core stuff, find, I'll say dot sort course code 1. Whoops. So again, this will sort our courses alphabetically. So we can load the form now, but it's not populated. We need to do the work in the view to display the name, display the date, set the course code, and status. So we can do this in our view pretty much the same way we would have done it in PHP. For the name, we can just say value equals. And then in our handlebar tag, it'll just be project.name. For the date, we'll set it as project.dueDate. So this should populate our two text boxes. Our drop-down list is going to be a bit more complicated. Just going to try this in Chrome. In Firefox, filling those date fields is somewhat problematic. Wonder if I just take out the type equals date. Oh, that's not very good. Okay, I'll figure out the formatting. I'm going to leave that for now. I'll have to figure this out, how to get the date to show. But now we've got this trick about getting the right course selected. So even when I pick COMP2106, still just defaults to the first option. So doing this in HBS is a little bit tricky. We can't actually write, HBS doesn't write, like I can't write an if statement here to determine which is the correct course code. HBS doesn't support that kind of logic in the views. What it wants us to do instead is to use what they call a helper function. So we can write this as a function, but we have to put it in our app.js, and then it's available anywhere in the project. I know it seems a bit strange to do that. But I'm going to go to app.js. And maybe I'll put this just down here after our database connection. So this is an HBS helper function to select, correct, to pre-select the correct drop-down option. So anytime we're editing and we want to preset a drop-down to a particular option, we can call this function. So first we need to require HBS. It's already installed in our project. And we're going to call the register helper method. So we want, this is for creating an option in a drop-down. And we pass it the current value and the selected value. So we'll say if values match, add selected to this option tag. So we'll initialize a string variable as empty. And if these two values, the current value and the value of the option, if they're the same, we're going to change this property to the word selected. So if these are equal, we want to add the word selected into that one option tag. And then we return a string which will create our option tags. Kind of a clunky way of doing this. But this is what we're limited to with HBS. So we're going to create the options this way. And when we hit on the current value, we're going to add the word selected. Whoops, that should come out. We're going to add the word selected to the option tag. So this goes in our app.js. Ideally, we could write the logic right in our view. HBS doesn't allow us to. So we got to register this as a global function, and then we can call it from our view. So now I'm going to rewrite, rather than just creating the options, instead, we're going to call our create option method. So we're passing in so the course code, the code of our courses variable, and then the course code from our parent, our project option. I think this should work. We'll have to try it out. And then we may have to call this 3 times down here. Let's see. So if I refresh, okay, none of these are showing as it should be project.course. Project.course, comparing it to this .course code. Okay, so now it changes and selects the right option in the menu. When I pick an assignment from COMP2106, so here's our revised select list. And I want to create the options this way as well. So I'm actually going to take these, well, I'm going to do it like this. So I'll call create option. to do, and project.status. So this will also call our helper I may have to put these in single quotes. Yeah, I think that'll be a We'll see if this works for our status. Okay, so they all show as to do. We view the source. Not entirely sure that worked. So we're almost done. I will have to deal with the date. I'll have to figure out that formatting later. So the last thing we need to do is write the post method. So when we save, it'll do an update. So if we start on an assignment, we can change the status from to do to doing. And when we save it, the status should get updated. So we'll write our post handler, call it a day. So we want to do a post at /projects/edit ABC123. So same URL as our get. Request response next. And Mongoose has a neat method called find one and update. So it'll find the document and then it'll allow us to update the document. So we'll call find one and update, which you can see my code editor recognizes. We have to pass in the ID, which will come from our URL parameter. Right? So that's our first parameter. And then in JSON format, we need to map the properties. So name comes from our request.body.name. Due date comes from the due date field. So we got to map each field. Of course. And we're going to include the status. So we can update the status. So we're going to find the document with this ID. And then we're going to update the 4 properties from the 4 form inputs. And we want Mongoose to try and do an update. If we get an error, we'll log it. Otherwise, we'll take the user back to the main project screen. So same like we did after deleting, we'll just redirect. So find the document based on the ID, update it with the 4 form values, and redirect if it's successful. So we can try to update a project now. So let's say, I'll just leave the due date as it is. I start lab 2. So I change the status from to do to doing. Okay, what did we miss? Project. Name equals status, ID equals status. That's interesting. Why is status not defined? Let's see. Thanks, Rebecca. I'm trying to see where I have it. Because it's request. Oh, whoops. That's a dot. Thank you. I had a comma instead of a dot. That's why. That should be a dot. So I'll resubmit. And now it updates my assignment and shows that it's in progress. Right. We may even be able to add some logic here. I'm not sure about using different classes depending on the status for to do, doing, and done. Excuse me. But we'll leave that for now. So a few little things to clean up. I'll need to fix up the date formatting. But we can now do a full suite of CRUD operations with our projects. We can add, read, edit, and delete. And we've also got our drop down. So if I go in here to lab 2, okay, we'll have to figure out why this isn't working. I'll clean that up as well, because it's showing as doing. So I will clean that up. Wonder if I take that out, if it works. No. Okay, I'll figure that one out for next week. Okay, I'm going to push everything. I will just take my password out. I'm going to push one more time. So for this week, for next week, there's no exam. We're just going to have a regular class. But you do have a review quiz for this week. So it's due next Wednesday at 5 o'clock. I believe there's 10 short answer questions covering the content from classes 4, 5, and today's class 6. So you have a week to do it. Please make sure you do the quiz on Blackboard by 5 o'clock next Wednesday. Okay, I will make sure to get everyone's portfolios marked before class. If you have any questions, I can hang around. I have a meeting at 3, but I can stay in the WebEx room for a little while.